This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Wonder if you guys stayed up for the craziness on Thursday night. I did, kind of. I will explain my process in a moment here when we talk about the Vikings game and just what we saw in that 36-28 win over the Steelers that was way harder than it needed to be. Almost on cue, the Wild did the same thing in their game, making San Jose get back into it after being up 3-0 going into the third. Wild ends up winning that game 5-2, but it got to 3-2 in the third period. Not quite as much of a nail-biter as that Vikings game, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Got Chris Hine on to talk Timberwolves and their 4-game losing streak and what's been going on with that team. And Mark Craig's NFL picks, not including, of course, Thursday night's game because that already happened. And I don't know if you could have predicted how that game would have gone. That said, maybe you could have, because here's what you missed. It was 26-0. Vikings over the Steelers. They played an immaculate first half, 23-0 in the first half. Early third quarter, it's 26-0. They seem like they're in complete control. And I literally think to myself, I've been watching Vikings games for a very long time, since the 80s, since I was, maybe 10, 12 years old. Growing up, I was a little bit more of a Dolphins fan. I didn't really have a team growing up in North Dakota, but, at a certain point, the Vikings became the team I watched the most. And so, I've been watching Vikings games for 35 years probably, at least paying attention to them in some fashion. And there's not a lot of Vikings games where I said to myself, okay, they've got this one under control. I feel like it's pretty well in the bag. I don't have to watch the rest of it. So at 26-0, I went to help put our two older kids to bed, which involves bedtime stories and, playing some games, things like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to record it. I'll watch the rest of it later, but I feel pretty secure, strangely secure for a team that has had its struggles this season. I feel strangely secure that this one is in the bag, that they've got this one. And so I'm working on bedtime, and I'm seeing, okay, it's up to 29-0. All right, late third quarter, feeling even better about it. And I'm just kind of monitoring the game on a score app while I'm doing, just occasionally while I'm doing bedtime. And I see it get to 29-7. I'm like, yeah, 29-7, okay. And then I see, okay, interception, 29-14, and it's still early fourth quarter. And I'm like, okay, that's only 2 scores. Steelers get the ball back right away, get another quick touchdown, miss the 2-point conversion, which is important, but it's 29-20 at that point. Vikings get a quick touchdown, 36-20. You're like, okay, order's been restored. There's another turnover, and then the next thing you know, it's 36-28. Next thing you know, the Steelers have the ball deep in Vikings territory with one final play in the end zone, just like last week, to tie the game. And if not for a jarring hit by Harrison Smith, Pittsburgh might have scored the touchdown that gave them a chance to get the 2-point conversion that got that game somehow improbably into overtime. Now, some of this is on me, right? I should know better. We should all know better based on 60-some years of Vikings history and based on what's happened this season, that no lead is secure. But that one felt like it was completely secure. Pittsburgh looked terrible. I had no idea how this team won 6 games this year. They looked completely confused in run defense. They could get nothing going on offense. The Vikings were aggressive. They were getting their pass rush going. And then at a certain point, they just flipped a switch, and next thing you know, they were roaring back on this Vikings team that's made a habit of that happening. And, statistically, the Vikings still dominated to a certain degree, but, a couple of Cousins' interceptions and turnovers down there late in the game, and, just short drives, things like that, and all of a sudden it's a game. And just like, the NFL has been like that all year, specifically the Vikings have been like that all year, but this one should not have been that hard. And that was the post-game message from a lot of Vikings players. Mike Zimmer. Here is Zimmer after the game talking about what he witnessed.
That team that played in the first half for us was pretty darn good, and I think could probably beat anybody. The team that played in the second half probably could get beat by anybody. So, there was a lot of really, really good things in the first half. We ran the ball. I thought Cook was outstanding. Our offensive line opened up a lot of holes. Defensively, we were getting after the quarterback and playing good in coverage. And then the second half, we were up by 26 or something, or 29, and we throw an interception on the first play of the drive. And then, we get we get two turnovers and the start of this, or we end up kicking 2 field goals at the start of the second half, which, we got the ball down in there and we probably could have put them away. But anyway, we fought like crazy, like we always do.
Now, we talk about Zimmer and Rick Spielman's job status like it's just another facet of the team, like it's the run defense. It's a really more serious matter. People's livelihoods at stake here. But my goodness, if they had lost that game somehow after being up 29-0 late in the third quarter at home and dominating a Steelers team that seemed to want no part of competing in that game, if I was owner Ziggy Wilf, if I was the Wilfs, I would have had a hard time restraining myself from just making mass firings on the spot, because that would have been the sort of unforgivable loss on top of last week's unforgivable loss. So to salvage a win, I guess, is in his favor, but it doesn't mean anything unless they go and win in Chicago next week too. And if they can't correct these mistakes, players had kind of the same messaging, wanted to kind of accept the win, but know that they didn't. They certainly didn't finish the way they wanted to. Here was Kirk Cousins, followed by Anthony Barr, talking about that.
I would have loved to have won that game, a little earlier, if you will, but a win's a win, and proud of the way, our team played, our defense played, our special teams played, our offense, our run game. Proud of Dalvin, his toughness, scoring 36 points and having 450 yards of offense is there's a lot to be excited about there, but there's also a lot we can do better. So.
Yeah, can't make it easy for whatever reason. Should have probably never got to that point, but definitely feels good to kind of redeem ourselves from the last week. So obviously the first half is what we want to build on. Second half we kind of want to disregard that, correct the mistakes, and get ready for next Monday.
So, in the end, a win is a win. I posted their updated standings, by the way, after the game. 4, 5, 2, and 2. I know that sounds like too much, but here's how I see it breaking down. Vikings have 4 wins that took a decade off of your life over the Lions, Panthers, Packers, and Steelers. 5 losses that nearly killed you: Bengals, Cardinals, Cowboys, Ravens, and Lions. 2 solid wins: Seahawks and Chargers, and 2 basic losses: Browns and 49ers. But that's like 9 out of the 13 games this year have been absolutely down to the wire. The kinds of games that you figure you might see 2 or 3 times a year. They've had 9 of those already this season. And I asked you guys on Twitter also for your reactions to the game. Luke Braun said Jordan Berry got his revenge. Let's not overlook that. Jordan Berry's punt before Pittsburgh's final possession pinned the Steelers inside their own 5, made them go a long way with no timeouts, and just the extra yards that they didn't have to that they had to get might have been the difference in that game, because if the Steelers had 20 seconds more or 10 yards fewer, that game might have gone into overtime, and then we're talking about a completely different story here. But my favorite response came from Dane Ryan, who said there's zero joy in this team. Even if they make the playoffs, it'll be a miserable watching experience. And that kind of sums up where fans are at. Then on top of that, I believe, I can only presume based on last names, Richard Ryan replied to that tweet saying, "My son is finally a true Vikings fan. I'm so proud." And that just made me laugh, because it just speaks to generations who have passed along this curse is too strong of a word, because it's still fun to watch the games, even if we complain about this, but have passed along the angst that it takes to watch this team year in and year out struggle and try to win and maybe someday make the Super Bowl. I don't think it's happening this year, you guys, but they are still in the hunt. They put up the in the hunt graphic on the game. My favorite thing, the in the hunt for the playoffs. got that win, 6-7 now. If they go to Chicago and win next week, they are certainly in the mix in that NFC playoff race, even with tough games at Green Bay and against the Rams left, and then that last one home against the Bears. So we'll see where this season takes them the rest of the way. The only thing I would probably predict is that I should not turn any game off because you never know what is going to happen.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Happy to have Chris Hine back on Daily Delivery. First 5-time guest in Daily Delivery history. Got to be up to like 15 or 20 at least now, Chris. And it seems like every time I've had you on to talk Timberwolves, of course, you cover the Wolves for the Star Tribune lately. It feels like alternating appearances. It's up, down, up, down. It's like, hey, the Wolves are going good. What's going right? And then it's the Wolves are going bad. What's going wrong? And we're back in one of those down cycles with 4 losses in a row. Maybe not terribly shocking given that we knew the schedule was going to get harder this month. But, from where you sit, maybe we can start big picture and then I might get into Wednesday's game and Wednesday's post game. What are you seeing from this team right now that's leading to this 4-game losing streak?
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of things right now. First of all, I think just this Wolves team in general is bound to have bouts of inconsistency. They're still a young team, still learning how to win on a consistent basis in this league. As you mentioned, the schedule has gotten tougher. You have teams that have made deep playoff runs of late in Utah, Atlanta, and the Nets in the last 3 games here. Those are 3 tough opponents, and they haven't had everybody available for these games. We've seen illness come through the team that's cost guys a couple of games, like Jaden McDaniels and Jared Vanderbilt. Patrick Beverly's just got back in the lineup last night. D'Angelo Russell all of a sudden goes out because his ankle's bothering him for the last 2 games. Karl-Anthony Towns missed one of those games. So you kind of piece all this together, and it adds up to a 4-game losing streak. That's kind of life in the NBA right now.
The defense, to me, hasn't been as good. They're still 10th overall in defensive rating in the league, but last 4 games, they are 24th. And I think that was kind of one of the questions going into this stretch was, would that good defensive work hold up? And again, I think some of the things you said bear repeating, especially Patrick Beverly missing 3 of those 4 games. But he comes back in that Wednesday game and they give up 136 to Utah. And, a couple of these teams lately have been shooting the ball pretty well, Utah and Atlanta in particular, but 24th over that last 4-game stretch when they've lost all 4. Do you feel like defensively they're going to kind of settle in more as a middle of the pack team as they kind of see the schedule sort out? Or is this just kind of a confluence of missing guys and going against better offenses, and that they're still going to have maybe a slightly above average to, maybe even better than that defense as the year goes on?
I tend to think that it's going to be maybe an average to slightly above average defense as the year goes on. I don't think it has too much to do with the guys that they were missing, because I think what you saw the last couple of games here with Atlanta and Utah is even when the Wolves were playing, good defense or playing well defensively, they were allowing a decent number of open threes. And teams like, Sacramento and New Orleans and San Antonio and Houston, those teams maybe don't have the personnel or the shooting to take advantage of some of those open looks. So kind of the defense they're playing against those teams works well because those teams can't necessarily knock down the open shots that they may have or that they may generate. So the Wolves defense maybe looks better as a comparison, but Utah and Atlanta, 2 of the best shooting teams in the league, you give them open looks, and we saw, I think they each hit 25 threes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you get these teams that actually have the shooting to take advantage of these open looks, and it could be a recipe for disaster. So I do think, given all that, my thing is I think they're probably just a middle of the pack defense. You play this way, you maybe create a lot of turnovers, allow some open threes against some of the worst teams in the league. and it looks okay. But you do this against some of the better teams in the league, and you might be struggling a little bit more, and maybe have to score just as much as you're allowing up if you're going to try to stay in these games.
Now, after that Wednesday game, Anthony Edwards and Patrick Beverley had a lot to say. One from Beverley was that when they're healthy, the Wolves are one of the best teams in the league, and so he's not particularly worried about this skid. Are you buying that, or is that a veteran trying to prop up his team? Because it feels a little bit more like the latter. Like I think they were playing well when they had good health, but aside from Russell, who let's face it, has been up and down, but has been a key piece this year. They're 0-4 when he doesn't play this year. Aside from Russell, they had pretty much everybody available the night, right?
Yeah. So here's my thought about that quote. And Anthony Edwards has said that a lot. Like, hey, if we just have everybody available, we'll be all right. The reality of life in the NBA is that guys come in and out of the lineup all the time.
Yes,
it happens a lot. That's the problem with that. It's not so. I actually believe them that they can hang with anybody in the NBA when everybody's healthy. We've seen it. They beat Milwaukee. They beat Miami. They beat Philadelphia on the road. Like when everybody's healthy, they do have the capability of beating anybody in this league. But that's the fact of life in the NBA is that guys come in and out of the line. D'Angelo Russell, misses a chunk of games every year. It's just injuries and illness and things like that. They happen in the NBA. So you're the likelihood of you having everybody available for significant stretches of time is not that high, especially with guys who maybe have some injury histories or at least some history of missing games during their careers. So I think that statement is a true one, but I just don't think it happens as often as you think, especially with this team.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, that's the reality in pretty much any professional sport right now. Like you're just not going to be 100% at most points in the season, and if you are, it's probably pretty fortunate that you are. And you'd love to see every team at 100% all the time because then you're getting the best possible matchups and action on the court. But yeah, you're going to be missing guys at various points. The Wolves certainly know that. Another thing Beverley said, both he and Edwards were taking exception to Rudy Gobert not guarding Towns. I'm going to get into the Edwards Towns kind of go fast thing in a minute, but it just struck me as odd when you lose by 32 to critique another team's defensive game plan when you only score 104 points. I mean, it seems like it was a pretty good game plan because it seemed like it worked.
Yeah, I think so. I think Patrick Beverley's, I think he's trying to play some mind games here for the next time they play each other because the Wolves play the Jazz 2 more times this month out in Utah. So I think he's trying to get in Rudy Gobert's head a little bit with what he said, basically. And for those that didn't see what he said, he basically said, look, I hear that that's the defensive player of the year over there. And if I'm the defensive player of the year, I want to guard the best player on the other team. Like, why isn't he guarding Karl-Anthony Towns, essentially? Why is he guarding Jared Vanderbilt? Which, a little hilarious that he kind of nicks his own teammate along the way with this this quote. But the point is, I think next when they play each other again on December 23rd, I think he's trying to get Gobert to go to Quinn Snyder and say, hey, let me try to guard Cat for a little while here and see what happens. And I think that if that happens, maybe the Wolves like that matchup a little better. And so maybe he's just trying to a few mind games here for the setting up for the 2 matchups later this month.
I don't think it's going to work because it worked for Utah on Wednesday. And it's kind of this, you wrote about it, it's kind of this Utah defensive model that some other teams have tried where it's not necessarily the team's best player that's the primary defender on Cat, or not their best big. It's they're starting with somebody else on them, oftentimes a power forward, so that they can use their center to double and leaving, Jared Vanderbilt or Josh Okogie or whoever they have, Jaden McDaniels at the 4, because let's face it, none of those 3 guys have provided a whole lot of offense this season. And, if Towns tries to beat the double team by passing to Vanderbilt, there's a 98% chance the ball is going to go off Vanderbilt's hands and out of bounds because he's, for all of his strengths, good hands is not one of them. So it does seem like this is a tactic teams are employing, and Edwards is basically saying in his news conference Wednesday after the game that he's imploring Towns, hey, go faster, go, don't wait for the double team, get the ball. And if you got Bogdanovich, who, Edwards kind of trashed by saying it's disrespectful for Bogdanovich to be guarding Cat. If you got someone smaller and less skilled on you, go at him right away. And I don't think he's wrong, but it was an interesting dynamic when a second-year player is telling a seventh-year player what to do. I
think so, but I think as I tried to write in my game story the other day, I think it speaks to a little bit about the dynamic of where Anthony Edwards is as a voice on this team too. And I think you saw a little glimpse into what that's like, that he has that latitude to go to Karl-Anthony Towns and maybe say stuff like that to him. That news conference, I made a joke on Twitter that it was Pride Night at Target Center, and Patrick Beverley and Anthony Edwards certainly brought the shade that us in the LGBTQ community love to throw from time to time.
Yes,
so it was a post game press conference full of shade. It was great. But I do think going forward, maybe this Utah loss maybe provide some sort of breaking point as it relates to this defense and how Karl responds to it. We'll see how it goes going forward, because as long as it works, other teams are going to keep trying it. We just have to see how Towns responds and wants to make them pay for it.
Now, again, you talked about breaking point. We've been talking about this tough December schedule for a while. Maybe we can finish up with this notion. I mean, they've lost 4 in a row. The season's gone, 3-1 start, and then lost 8 of 9, I think, and then they won 7 of 8, and then they lost 4 in a row now. But this tough December schedule doesn't quite look as bad in the next stretch, because some of these teams that we thought are going to be pretty good have certainly had their own struggles as well. I'm talking about like Portland, Denver, the Lakers. They got the Mavericks twice in there. I mean, some of these teams are certainly still good, but those are, more equal, even tests for the Wolves. I mean, as you think about getting out of this month, going close to 500 the rest of the way probably sets them up in okay shape. Is that kind of the baseline in your mind of what needs to happen for them to feel good about what's going on here?
I think so. I think close to 500 is a reasonable goal for the rest of the schedule. You have Cleveland and the Ricky Rubio revenge game part 2 coming up.
Kevin Love too, maybe.
And Kevin Love. You have a gettable game in Portland against a team that's kind of a little bit reeling right now. Denver has been hovering around 500. They're not a kind of a regular season juggernaut as they have been the last couple of years here. So you do have some of the more gettable games coming up here. But again, to our points earlier, if everybody's available, I think the Wolves, have chances in all these games. If D'Lo's out again, as much as some people like to criticize him, the fact is he has like the highest defensive rating on the team. He's been important at that end of the floor as well as the offensive end of the floor this year. So I think that just from a team perspective, they miss him on the floor. If he's not available for these next couple of games, then we could see a repeat of what's happened the last few nights here.
Well, we will see. The Cavaliers game is Friday night. Should be fun to see Ricky Rubio and Kevin Love, like you said, a possible revenge game there, and an important one for the Wolves. Like you said, want to stop this skid before it gets too deep, and maybe set us up for the next time we talk in 2 or 3 weeks to be talking about, hey, the Wolves have figured it out once again.
That's always the way with this team, isn't it?
It is. Well, good stuff, Chris. We'll catch you down the road, okay?
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Now, I wrote a little bit more about the Wolves on StarTribune.com and in your Friday Star Tribune. Just Karl-Anthony Towns in post-up situations this year has been really bad, and a lot of that's a function of those double teams that Anthony Edwards has been talking about. Towns is turning the ball over on more than 30% of his post-ups this season. It's an absurdly high number. And when and if that number goes down, their offense will be a lot better. And I think a lot of that's a function of going faster and not waiting for that double team to come where some of those turnovers are happening. Now, it's been a problem in recent years. Last year he had the highest rate among big men, among post-ups with post-up players with at least 100 post-ups. 2 years ago, he had the second highest rate among 100 or more post-ups. But back in 2017, 2018, he's only turning the ball over on 10% of his post-ups. The Jimmy Butler year, he was much more efficient and careful with the ball back then, and he needs to get back to that. He needs to figure out what's wrong with his post-up game right now, especially with all the turnovers, because that cannot happen if you're going to have a functioning offense. Mark Craig joins the show right now, covers the Vikings, the NFL for the Star Tribune, does the weekly picks segment. We won't talk about the Vikings game. That has already happened, but plenty of other intrigue for the week. Some good matchups. Not such a great one with Packers and Bears. Imagine that'll be a little bit of a walkover for Green Bay, who owns the Bears, right? Not the Hallis family or whoever owns them now.
Bears owner Aaron Rodgers. Let me look it up here. I think I got him winning handily. This would be he's 24-8 against them. 35-13 is what I got. And he'd be 24-4 after this one. The Bears are in a similar situation coaching wise. They're kind of hitting the end of the run, and Packers, they just dominate this division, and that's one reason why, and that's because of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and it doesn't figure to end in this game. And some of the best games this week are maybe over in the other conference. Bucks have a good one, right? Is that the Bucks and the Bills this week?
The Bucks and the Bills, yeah. I mean, that's the Bills are in an interesting run. For 7 straight weeks, they followed a loss with a win, and vice versa. And then they lost. Each week has been a loss followed by a win. So to me, that's I like the Bills are up and down. The Bucks have won 3 straight with 30 or more points. It sort of feels like the Bucks could hit another little hiccup. I mean, they're still going to be a playoff team, be a force, a Super Bowl contender. But I think maybe it's time for the Bills to come up a little bit and the Bucks to go down a little bit.
Yeah, what did you make of last week's Bills game and the Patriots? Threw the ball 3 times all game? You must have enjoyed that.
Yeah, 2 or 3 for night. I asked Cousins about that when we were talking about wins and losses. And I said, well, what do you think about Monday night? Mac Jones. That's a win for Mac Jones. And he went into some long Cousins where the brain's really working on how all the different variables that go into that. But yeah, it is fascinating to watch wins and losses. And I'm a believer in wins and losses for quarterbacks to a certain degree. But 2 or 3 weeks ago, Lamar Jackson throws 4 interceptions and he wins. He wins the game because the Browns can only come up with 3 points off of 4 turnovers. So it was interesting just because it's the Patriots, and that the Patriots, when they get something, when Belichick gets something in his head, he's going to go with it. He came to Minneapolis back in the Childress era when this team had the number 1 run defense, and we asked him about, do you have to run the ball? He's like, you better make sure you establish balance. He came in and only ran it 5 times and passed it 40 sometimes. So when he does that, it works, and it's coming, but it still works.
I remember that game. I think it was the 2006 season, and the Vikings had started maybe 3-1 or something like that in Childress's first year, and the Patriots came in the first drive, marched right down the field, didn't run the ball a single time. Brady just zip, 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 and I think the final was something like 31-7 or something. It was not a close game.
No, not at all. And that was, Belichick ahead of time say, well, you got to establish a balance, da-da-da-da. He had no desire to run against the Williams wall. And that sort of other teams started, copying it a little bit. It seems simple, and Belichick identifies the simple, I guess, and exploits it.
Focus on a couple more games in the NFC. Washington, Dallas, interesting. Washington going pretty well right now. You wrote in your picks about Taylor Heineke finding a little magic. I still wonder, he was with the Vikings back in 2016, injured his foot. Didn't he sever a tendon in his foot kicking in a window? And that was like a month before Bridgewater's devastating injury. I've always wondered if things might have played out differently for him here in the Vikings quarterback trajectory if he hadn't had that injury that year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. It's going to take a little bit more of a sample size before we, although he's building, he's putting, as they say, he's stacking the bricks, with the playoff game last year. And then what he's had 4 straight games of completing 70% of his passes, which is the longest streak in the NFL right now. They've won 4 in a row. There's a confidence there. It's actually my upset special. So, Dallas is sort of wobbling. I mean, this could be one of those get-right games for the Cowboys, but these two teams play each other 2 times, I think, in 3 weeks. So I like the first one going to Washington, at Washington.
That would not necessarily bode well for the Vikings, although it might not matter. Last one, Monday game is probably the best game of the week. Rams at Cardinals. We'll see if the Rams can catch the Cardinals. They certainly would need to win this game, I would think, to have any crack at the division. You've got the Cardinals winning this game in a fairly high-scoring affair.
Yeah, I mean, they played back in week 4, and the Cardinals won, in Los Angeles, like 37-20. You look at the Rams. We were all hot on the Rams that first month. It was just like they got this all-star team, and Stafford's the perfect fit. Well, since they lost to the Cardinals in that week 4, they're basically 5-0 against teams that aren't any good, and 0-4 against the good teams, the better teams in the league. So, I like the Cardinals. The Cardinals not only are good and talented, but they're also getting healthy again with Hopkins back. Kyler Murray seems to be back moving the way that he moves. So, until the Rams can have a signature win after, I think week 3, they might have beat the Buccaneers or something. We were really high on them. But since then, it's just been kind of like they've followed the script. When it's a good team, they lose. When it's a bad team, they win.
That's not a bad regular season formula, but it's not a great playoff formula. So we'll see how that shakes out. Mark Craig, good stuff. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about when we reconvene a week from now.
We will.
Enjoyed Mark's picks as always. It was a little shorter this week because we didn't have the Vikings, obviously, to talk about. But I will leave you with the final message on that subject. In the industry, I'd like to say good teams win, great teams cover. The Vikings, through all of it, did manage to cover against the Steelers on Thursday night. Let's finish quick with the cooler. I alluded to it at the start. The Wild jumped out to a 3-0 lead on the Sharks. Looked like they were in complete control. Then it got to 3-2 in the third period before the Wild managed to pull away again and win 5-2. Another win. They keep stacking them up on top of themselves. I believe that is now 8 in a row for the Wild, just, cruising through the West, just staying hot. The superlatives are way up there. Kirill Kaprizov, after, I don't want to say a slow start to the year, but getting a lot of attention, figuring out how to play through that. He has been absolutely phenomenal lately, and had more of the good work that he has been doing. Wild at the top of the NHL for the first time in a decade, since December 18th, 2011. That is in Sarah McClellan's game story. Go read that. They lead the league in wins and points, 19 wins, 39 points. This is a team that's got something going for them this season, and maybe if you're looking for less heartbreak, that would be a team for you to latch onto as the winter goes on. That'll do it for me today. That'll do it for me this week. We'll be back at it Monday with Patrick Royce. Won't have a Vikings game to talk about. Should be a freewheeling, fun Monday show. And we'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Watch out for all the snow.